Last month, New Brunswick's Conservative government, under the leadership of Premier Blaine Higgs, announced changes to Education Policy 713 to, among other things, require parental consent from children under the age of 16 in order for them to change their name or pronouns at school. And while 69% of Maritimers and 57% of Canadians share the same view on gender identity as the New Brunswick government, trans activists do not. These activists, along with liberal politicians like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, have denounced Higgs' parental rights policy as transphobic. Premier Higgs is also facing opposition from some progressive conservatives in the province of New Brunswick. Cabinet Ministers Dorothy Shepherd and Trevor Holder have resigned from cabinet following the policy change, and PC riding presidents have filed paperwork in a first step to initiate a leadership review. In response to the turmoil from the Big C conservative establishment, parents are standing up and showing their support for Premier Higgs and his parental rights policy. Today, I will be speaking with New Brunswick mother Faytene Grasseschi. You may know her from her TV show, Faytene TV. Grasseschi has started a campaign called Don't Delete Parents, which has three goals: supporting Premier Higgs, respecting parental rights, and advocating for the implementation of school choice, a policy that has already been implemented in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Quebec. But before we get started, please remember to drop a like on this video and subscribe to True North if you haven't already. Well, Faytene, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Elie, good to be with you.
So we're going to talk about your campaign in a moment, but first, we don't often hear about conservative parties and conservative governments in Atlantic Canada, even though there are 3 out of 4 provinces that are governed by one. Many expected Alberta or Saskatchewan to be the first to stand up for parents amid rampant gender ideology in schools. So why do you think it was New Brunswick, under the leadership of Blaine Higgs, that decided to take a lead on this?
Well, I think it was just the policy was up for vote, up for debate, and there were concerns raised about policy 713. And so the amendment came forward by the Minister of Education to ensure that parents would not be deleted from the lives of their children. And so I think the reason it came up first here conversationally is just because it came up first in the legislative docket. And and we're really grateful for the common sense that our Premier is demonstrating with this, and there are many. To be honest, I was at a political rally on Monday night. It was actually with Pierre Poilievre down right in the heart of St. John. It was packed out, and to be honest, the greatest applause, I think, arguably the greatest applause, came when he gave Blaine Higgs a shout out and said, "Hey, I want to give Blaine Higgs a shout out." It wasn't on this issue, but everybody in the room knew that extended roar of applause for Premier Blaine Higgs was because of his common sense stance on this issue right now, because it's the one that's front and center, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. How about you tell us a bit about your Don't Delete Parents campaign now? Why did you start it and what you're trying to achieve?
yeah, well, I want to say as well that even though I'm known sort of nationally, maybe for my TV show and the work that we've done in Parliament, this is actually my riding. Blaine Higgs is my personal MLA. He's not just my premier, he is my MLA. I've met with him before on other issues related to our family, medical care, and all that type of stuff. And so I know him personally, and this lands right in my personal backyard. I have kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, right? So this is me. This isn't just Faytene, the TV show host. This is Faytene, the mom, right? And so I just believe I've been around long enough to know that when you have leaders that stick their neck out on cultural hot topics that that you care about, when you finally find a leader that has courage and is bringing stuff forward with common sense and compassion, that he's paying a price, and I know you covered this in your article, Elie, that 2 cabinet ministers have step down. There is a call for a leadership review. And of course, people are citing different things like his leadership style, but everybody knows that this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of him saying, hey, I'm going to make a decision on this and I'm going to stand with parents. And you know what? Most New Brunswickers actually appreciate him in his leadership on this particular issue. And so he could go to a leadership review on this. And so Don't Delete Parents is actually very simple. It's a website, don'tdeleteparents.ca. And this is a communication hub for those of us, not just in the province, but nationwide, that want to show our appreciation for Premier Blaine Higgs and stand with him in support of his gracious stance with parents, and also to stand with the many others that are on the same page. And so we put together the website. There's 3 primary goals that are stated on the website. Number 1, support Blaine Higgs. We have a petition. People can sign that petition. Every time we get 5,000 signatures, we're going to actually physically print the petition off. We're going to send the names and the postal codes. We're not going to give people's personal information out, just the postal codes, so they know where these names are coming from. And we're going to send a message that not only do parents in New Brunswick care about this issue and appreciate the strong stance that Higgs is making, but that parents nationwide, that Canadians nationwide are watching this. And I do want to say this, Elie, it doesn't take a sharp pencil to understand that this is precedent setting, that if Premier Blaine Higgs is politically assassinated, so to speak, over this particular issue, that will send a signal to elected officials nationwide, federally, provincial, and municipally, that when you stand with parents, be prepared that you could lose your job and you're probably going to pay a price with your career. Some elected officials will say, I don't care. I'm going to stand with parents regardless. Others will say, no way, Jose, that's too big of a price for me to pay. But I want to say this, if Premier Blaine Higgs has a positive outcome, if the support is there, if this goes to a leadership review, his leadership comes under review and it goes to a vote with the membership, and he wins, and better yet, and he wins overwhelmingly, that is going to be a message to Premier Scott Moe. That is going to be a message to Doug Ford. That is going to be a message to Danielle Smith. That's going to be a message to premiers nationwide, particularly in these conservative provinces and jurisdictions, that when you stand with parents, it's a good move. It's a good move in terms of principle, but it's also a good move in terms of your political career, and because these are all things that come into the mix to determine whether or not a leader is going to stand. And so, we wish everybody was 100% principle, right? But that's just not reality. And so we need to send a message to our elected officials that if you stand with us and the things we care about, you will be rewarded. And so don'tdeleteparents.ca. Again, you can go to that website, you can sign the petition. There's some other action points there, all the emails for the MLAs here in New Brunswick, and anybody. Some people have said, well, that's kind of the New Brunswick issue. No, anyone from across Canada, email on this one, send the message. And then there are some other conversation points on the website as well about promoting the value that parents should never be deleted from the lives of their children on any level, mental health, physical health. If my child's having seizures at school, I should be the first one that's called. If my child is showing suicidal tendencies at school, I should be the first one that's called. If my child is making a life-altering decision around their sexual identity, I should be the first one that's called. Why? Because I love my child. And I brought my child into this world. I fed them with my own body, and I deserve to be informed on these important issues of health and well-being. So that tenet's there. And then the last thing that people will see when they go to don'tdeleteparents.ca is that we're encouraging our leaders to consider implementing policies that the money will follow the family. So if at some point, Robert and myself decide, as we actually have, that it's better for our children to have an alternative form of schooling rather than the public school system, that the money should follow us. It should follow our educational choice, whether that's homeschooling, whether that's private school, whether that's a Montessori system or whether that's the public school, should the public school have my confidence? And so it's our hard-earned money. It needs to follow our family rather than a system that might possibly be failing us, and worse yet, separating us from our children through passive aggressive policies that divide parents and their children. So so basically that is the bottom line. Don't delete parents.ca. People can go there and sign. And again, I want to emphasize from anywhere in Canada, because even though this is a provincially based scenario right now, it will have an impact. People all over Canada, premiers all over Canada right now are watching how Blaine Higgs is going to do with this one. So it really matters.
Oh, I agree that there is a great consequence, how it goes either way. It can either be a win for parents, it can either be a loss. I like that you touched on school choice. I'm a big advocate of school choice. I've written a column recently about school choice as a graduate of a private school. I'm a big fan of it, and it's worked in several provinces, and I think it should be implemented nationwide. So you launched a website with the petition last week. What's the response been so far? Are you getting good local support for your initiative?
Right out of the gate, I just put it on my personal Facebook wall, and then it's being administratively sort of organized through the nonprofit organization that I work with, For My Canada. And so we pushed it out through our email list, and we were getting, in the first couple days, we were getting about 100 signatures an hour. So it was actually just flying. The last couple days, it's throttled down a little bit. I'm not sure if it's being pushed down in the algorithms on social media or something like that. We'll find out. Maybe C11 has something to do with that. We'll see. Only the guys up there know on that one. But just to say this, that we appreciate you shedding the spotlight on it right now, because we want to see, like I said, every time we hit another 5,000, excuse me, we're going to be sending it off to our leaders again. So we would appreciate people not only going there, but sharing it with their spheres of influence that they know care about this issue.
Right, for sure. So, to me, it wasn't surprising when the trans activists and the liberals came out against this policy, because they tend to support gender ideology and this idea that schools can be better than parents. What I was disappointed with was seeing people who call themselves conservatives come out against this policy. And as you mentioned, there have been resignations of 2 cabinet ministers following the policy. There were several who voted with the Liberals on an anti-policy 713 motion in the legislature. And now there's the effort on the way to review Premier Higgs's leadership. Why do you think some conservatives are opposed to a policy that for many people is very common sense and very uncontroversial?
Yeah, I think just because of the political vitriol really around it, in terms of those that don't want parents to be engaged with their children on this particular issue. They want to push their agenda. They want to separate children from their parents on this particular issue. They're branding parents as being dangerous, which is an absolute ludicrous statement. Most parents in our nation are loving, kind, caring, responsible humans, and parents need our support, not our patronization. And so there is a lot of political vitriol, though, around it because of the movements that are pushing these types of things. And we know that. And so, I think sometimes when you're an elected official, unfortunately, you live in the headwinds of that pressure all the time. And obviously that wears, and sometimes it's just in the midst of that political pressure, it's hard to keep that clarity. But that's where I think parents need to just remind our elected officials, like, hey, what are you really doing here? Like, what are you really saying? Are you saying that it is okay for the government to separate a loving parent from the life of their child? Is that what you're saying? Because, and I want to say this, and I know this could be a controversial thing to say for some people, but is this not a repeat of the ideology of the residential school systems, where the governing officials of the day said, hey, the Indigenous parents aren't fit They're not, we need to take the Indian out of the Indian. So we as the government are going to step in between parents and the children. We're going to step in between because we know better. That arguably was the most damaging ideology has been the most damaging ideology that our nation has ever seen in terms of the devastation to generations, we're just going through, just trying to grapple with how to make that right. Many of our Indigenous brothers and sisters are just getting back on their feet now in terms of finding themselves again. And here we are with the exact same ideology with a different makeup on, but basically saying it's okay for the government to step in between. And I don't know what would cause a conservative or liberal or NDP or Green or Bloc or anybody who is an elected official to think that that's okay. But we as those who see it for what it is, need to really be diligent right now with love, with kindness. I'm not telling anybody to be mean or nasty about it, but just say, hey, actually this isn't okay. It's not okay for the government to step in between. And this is a line that we will not allow to be crossed because we love our kids, and no one loves our kids like we do. So I'm over talking here on that one, but just to say, I think it's just the political pressure that hits, Elie. But we can give counter pressure by bringing a strong emphasis that is common sense to support parents and families. And when you support parents, you support children.
Right. I do want to kind of play devil's advocate. Some of these activists who oppose the policy, they say that gender dysphoric children will be required to out themselves to potentially unsupportive parents. And as you mentioned, most parents do love their children. And I think a lot of the times when kids, whether they're gay or they end up becoming transgender, there's more fear about coming out. And when they come out, they actually realize that their parents love them. That's not, of course, everybody, but there's that aspect as well. But there are a very small minority of parents that are abusive. There are kids who may have grown up in a family where there's often comments about how the parents don't like transgenders, for example. I know that the policy has a pretty comprehensive way of dealing with kids that maybe aren't ready yet to talk to their parents about this. But what would you have to say to someone who has this concern? Maybe they have a lived experience themselves as someone with gender dysphoria, or that they know someone with gender dysphoria that had this experience, and they don't feel comfortable coming out to their parents, but would like their gender identity to be affirmed at school.
Yeah, well, there's a phrase that says love believes the best, right? And I think we need to cultivate a system that believes the best about parents. And this is the duty of legislators, that they need to sit down and they have to grapple with, obviously, the worst case scenario suggestions, like our questions, like, okay, what do you do if you have a situation that is really tough for a child? And I think there's solutions. It's like, that's where you have counselors, you have moderators, you have ones that bring the parents and the child together and create a safe environment for the children, if that's the case. But, so create those mechanisms of safety for the children, but don't delete parents from their child's life. And don't assume every parent is a villain. I am not a villain. Your parents were not villains. Like, most parents are not villains. And we need to make sure that we're supporting good parents rather than just playing defense against parents who are actually amazing, And so I think there's a way to protect children, and in these cases that you're talking about, to create a place for safe dialogue for them. And I think this is what our legislators have the responsibility to figure out. But good legislation will look at the whole and say, okay, we have, in this riding here, we have 80,000 parents that we need to consider. Most of them are loving, kind, generous, engaged parents that simply want the best for their children. And so how do we make a system that works for everybody? Because love truly does believe the best.
Right. And I think I would add to that these 80,000 parents, if that's the number, why should
Not 80,000 parents,
they
80,000,
yeah, but
residents.
like why a good thing to add to that, I think too, is why should all these good parents be misled and be deceived at the expense of a few when you can instead again have this comprehensive system, understanding that this is not a black and white issue and that the solution is more down the middle where we can respect parental authority while protecting kids who may be in abusive situation. And unfortunately, I feel like the dialogue often times on this issue, the gender issue, tends to be very polarized, and sometimes we don't have this nice message of love. Instead, we have one side claiming the other wants them dead, and then the other claiming that the other side are groomers. I don't think you really get anywhere productive when you have just these accusations and this black and white. So I really appreciate your answer there. As mentioned earlier, there are attempts to review Higgs's leadership, and he's even said he's willing to go to an election over this. What do you see happening in the next weeks or months regarding this issue? And do you think Higgs will end up being victorious and on the right side of history when it comes to the issue of parental rights?
Well, I think the ultimate answer to that is up to your viewers, up to people that care about this issue, right? Like the nation goes to those who show up. The province goes to those who show up. But where things are at right now is a review has been requested, a leadership review has been requested by enough EDAs or jurisdictions within the provincial construct here for these. There's a protocol to how these things happen. So the first stage has been passed. Now things need to be passed at the next level, which is the provincial tier. And if it goes through that level, if the request for a leadership review passes the next phase, then what will happen is it will go to the members. So that means everybody who has an active member who's a resident in New Brunswick, who has an active member of the Provincial Conservative Party of Canada, they will be able to vote. And my gut sense is, honestly, if people are catching what's happening here, my gut sense is that if this goes to a vote with the members, that he's going to win. I think he's going to win. I think the people that are trying to oust him are probably going to walk away with some egg on their face on this one, because they've picked the wrong issue. There's too many parents that are waking up, that love their kids. Like I said, they are not bad people. They love their kids. And this is a line, when you start to mess with what is most precious to us, and that is our children. That's where people start to get involved that in the past maybe haven't been involved, that didn't even know what a membership was in the New Brunswick party, Conservative Party. And so if it does go to a vote with the members, I think he'll probably win. But that's only if people like your viewers who are watching this from New Brunswick are awake to what's happening and taking action. So I'll do my part to make sure that people are educated.
And absolutely. And there was some polling done by Second Street, and they saw that 69% of Maritimers agree with Higgs on gender identity and 57% of Canadians. Because again, I think for most people, the left is trying to make this about transgender dignity. And for most people, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with respecting parents. It's about not deceiving parents. I mean, you need parental consent for your kid to go on a field trip. You need parental consent. At my school, you needed parental consent for your photos to be put on the school's Facebook page. You need parental consent to take an Advil or a Tylenol when you're feeling sick, yet somehow you don't need parental consent for a kid under 16. So 16 and 17-year-olds who have the age of consent can do whatever they want. But for, let's say, a 6 or 7-year-old child to be able to change their name and their gender and possibly referred to gender affirming counselors or clinician without their parents knowing, I mean, I think that's the issue. The issue is not about supporting gender dysphoric kids. The issue is about hiding the information from parents. And we know parents love their children, and parents won't put up with this idea that these are not your children, they're our children, they're the state's children, because that's simply not true. I do want to
And
shift. Go ahead.
not only that, Elie, I want to say this. It's not only that it's our children, which it is, but it's also our money. We're the ones that pay the salary of the teachers. We're the ones that pay the salary of the elected officials. So it's our children, and it's also our money. And so to delete the voices of parents is just, it is so off base. And it just needs to be called for what it is. And I appreciate what you said there, that this actually isn't about gender identity, it's about parents. And the other thing is that this could be precedent setting. So I would sit here as a parent and say, okay, so if you're going to delete me from my child's life in this area, what other areas are you going to delete me from my child's life in? If it's okay to do this, and is it okay to, again, I use the example of the seizure, like if my child has a seizure, like, is it okay for you to let them go have surgery, or whatever it would be? Like, if this is okay, then what else is okay? And so it's just a really, really unhealthy precedent to be setting across the board.
Oh, I agree. I think we've seen time and time again with the left that their ideology causes slippery slopes, where there was one thing and they said, oh no, that's a slippery slope fallacy, but yet the slippery slope ends up happening. Switching to federal politics now. I mean, education is supposed to be a provincial jurisdiction, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and several members of his cabinet have made their opposition to Policy 713 quite clear. Trudeau even dismissed parental rights as far right. So when Trudeau got into the culture war surrounding COVID by mandating the vaccine and vilifying the unvaccinated, it did not end well for him. There was the Freedom Convoy, and now wherever he goes, he gets heckled quite brutally. The Prime Minister is now using similar divisive rhetoric when it comes to the issue of parental rights. So where do you think this will go for him? Do you think Trudeau is opening himself to a reckoning if he decides to mess with parental rights?
Well, I think I just like to start by saying it's definitely disheartening to see, something that is a legitimate concern for the most important institution in our nation, and that is the family construct, to be responded to in this way with such a divisive style of politics, right? And I guess I would just gently edge back and say, okay, so if a parent who wants to be active in the life of their child is far right, does that mean that an Indigenous leader who wants to be active in the life of their child is, again, going back to that same mindset? Like, why in one case are we apologizing to our Indigenous fathers and mothers, and on the other side we're blaming, labeling, and shaming? Because the reality is if I can shame somebody, if I can label somebody, then I don't have to listen to them, right? I don't have to consider. If I can label you a lunatic, then I don't have to actually have to deeply consider your heart, your perspective, your intellect, right? And so it's quite disheartening to see this tonality and this response from our political leaders at times. And to be honest, it can be across the board, right? Like, just watch Question Period, and Canadians are watching Question Period saying, could somebody just have a real debate? Could somebody just have a debate where we're not just labeling and accusing and trying to get that soundbite in that's going to win us political points? Because this is not about political points. This is about families. This is about children. This is about our future. And so I don't know how this is going to play out for Justin Trudeau, but I think Canadians are getting really weary of, I would call it, kindergarten politics. I think Canadians are getting really weary of it. And I would just like to call Justin Trudeau and his Liberal cabinet just up a little bit higher, and just to say, hey, like, you're smart people. You're smart people. Like, you can have an intelligent conversation with parents on this important issue without blaming, shaming, and labeling them with petty politics. So just believing for believing for sunny days on this one that we can see a turn in our
Yeah,
political culture, I
yeah, it
believe.
would be nice to get those sunny ways he promised in 2015, indeed. Across in the House of Commons from Trudeau is Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party, and they've taken some slack from the grassroots for not tackling parental rights and other issues related maybe to gender ideology. Pierre did tell Trudeau to butt out of the New Brunswick debate, but it appeared to be more of a rationale on provincial jurisdiction rather than a clear parental rights stance. Do you think that federal conservatives should do more to promote parental rights in the face of gender ideology by, for example, proposing a national Bill of Rights? I know this was something that Leslyn Lewis had advocated for in the leadership race.
Yeah, you mean a national Bill of Rights for parents,
For
right? Is that?
parents, yeah.
No, I think at this point, most parents across our nation would be very grateful for such a piece of work in our parliament. And, I think, again, this comes back on us. It comes back on the people who care, because leaders are supposed to lead, like they're supposed to have an opinion and lead us somewhere. That's why we call them leaders. But also a good leader listens, right? A good leader will sit at a table of discourse with other intelligent people and hash stuff out. And so what I observe with Pierre right now, and obviously I'm not going to speak for him, and I don't, I haven't had a conversation with him about this, but I think he's listening right now. I think he's watching what's going to happen in New Brunswick. And so I would say to parents and people who care, if you do care about this and you want to see the conservatives, and not just the conservatives, the liberals, the NDP, everybody, if you want to see our elected officials, reflect your views and values on this, then make it the thing that's powerful in Canada. And we know that Pierre Poilievre is an advocate for freedoms. He wants to make Canada the freest nation on the earth. That's what he said over and over again. And so I think, there's definitely license to say, hey, this is one of those opportunities. But I think our leaders are watching us. I think they're watching us. I think they're watching, what's the response going to be on this one? How are people going to vote? And so if the spotlight's on us, then I would say, let's shine. Let's go and absolutely blow up Don't Delete Parents.ca. Not literally. I mean, don't sabotage the site. I mean, let's have so many people go sign that petition that, this is the thing that all of our members of parliament and elected officials want to be on the side of, because it's the right thing to do.
Right, for sure. And I do see this becoming an issue that will, if parents keep standing up the way those truckers stood up and their rights were being violated, there's a good chance that this will become the next big issue. But again, it's all up to the parents to decide how big they want this to be. Faytene, thank you so much.
And I'll say too, Elie, it's up to the people like you who will be parents.
Yeah.
And I know you're doing this interview with me right now because you care about this issue, but this is one for all of us, right? And freedom does matter. It matters across the board. And this is a moment.
Right, for sure. Well, Faytene, thank you. Thank you so much for your initiative on this issue and for coming to speak with me today, and wish you the best of luck, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Well, thank you for your journalism and your work in our nation as well, Elie. Have a good day.
If you enjoyed this interview, please consider supporting True North at donate.tnc.news today. For True North, I'm Elie Cantin-Nantel. Thanks for watching.